Breaking news! A new episode of Let's Be Frank starting now!
Hello all! I've been playing the Pokémon TCG for a long time now. There's been a big gap in my resume, you could say, between, 13, 14 years old and now. But I still do love the card game. But it has become abundantly clear to me that power creep in Pokemon is insane. I was not prepared for how strong these new cards are. Let me kind of explain to you my mindset here. Way back when I got into Pokemon for the first time, well, the TCG for the first time. I'd been into Pokemon in general for a little while. The newest expansions that were releasing at the time were the Black and White series, because the games had just come out. But going forward, as new expansions were released, I was able to get more and more cards, better cards, EXs. That was the big thing at that time. Capital E, capital X, EXs. And those were the bread and butter. Those were the kinds of cards you built decks around. In fact, actually, let me move you over here really quick so I can kind of show you what I'm talking about. Here, come here. Okay, this is my little wall of big Pokemon cards. I love getting those giant boxes with the giant cards in them, and I have a pretty decent amount. And this isn't even all of them. I just don't have frames for a lot of the other ones yet. So let's look at some of these so I can kind of show you what I'm talking about when it comes to these EXs. Like let's start with this Dragonite right here. Dragonite EX here has 180 HP, and he has a move called Jet Sonic. For 2 grass energy and an electric energy, he can do 80 damage. Not too bad, not the worst in the world. But if you discard an energy, he can do an extra 40 damage. So that's 120 damage. That's pretty good. That's gonna 2-shot really any other EX. Now let's move down here, maybe look at Gengar real quick. Gengar EX has 2 attacks. Night Attack, put 3 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. Okay, getting to attack the bench ain't bad. Maybe they have a basic Pokemon on there that has like 60 HP or something. So in 2 turns, that Pokemon's dead. Not bad. And then there's Dark Corridor. For 1 Psychic Energy and 2 colorless, so you could play one of those double colorless if you wanted to, it says your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. Switch this Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. So after doing 60 damage, you poison your opponent and then get out of there. Really, it's not that bad. You're not doing a ton of damage, but poisoning is a big deal. But cards didn't really stay in this level of power for long. Eventually, we got things like Mega Evolution cards around the time Gen 6 came around. I have a few of those up here too, like Hammer up here. So Mega Evolution Pokemon are supposed to be a lot more powerful than your normal EXs. That's why when you Mega Evolve your Pokemon, your turn just straight up ends. You don't even get to attack with it. So Mega Camerupt EX, he's got 1 attack. For 2 Fire Energy and 2 colorless, you can do 120 damage base. So that's already as much as the Dragonite EX could do, but he had to discard an energy to do this much. Let's see what else Mega Camerupt EX can do. The text says you may discard the top 3 cards of each player's deck. If you do, this attack does 40 more damage for each energy card you discarded in this way. So if you got super lucky, you could do quite the amount of damage. Or very unlucky and it kind of caps you at 120. So there's some give and take here. So you kind of understand what I'm saying, right? These cards are powerful, but there's a lot of drawback to this power. You have to use it wisely, Let's look at some of these newer cards. We have cards like Zacian V here. Now we're kind of skipping over GXs, GX cards can also be very powerful. They seem to come around the Sun and Moon era after Mega Evolution, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. So let's look at Zacian V really quick. Zacian has a move called Brave Blade. Just out the gate, it does 230 damage. Now, granted, you can't attack next turn. This is an every other turn sort of attack.
But 230 damage from a basic Pokemon is just insane. And your opponent would still only take 2 prize cards, knocking this guy out, just like he used to with EXs.
And of course, Zacian V here has a lot more HP than our friend old Dragonite up here, you know? 180 versus 220. That's quite the difference. But speaking of Vs, we are still in the era of Vs today, it would seem. We're getting things like V-Max, V-Star. V-Max in particular is like the Gigantamaxing of the TCG. And I happen to have a V-Max on this wall here, and I don't think you're prepared for how much this is going to do. Meowth V-Max. Granted, it evolves from Meowth V. So this isn't like, you know, your Dragonite EX up here that doesn't evolve. And it's unlike Mega Camerupt and Mega Salamence, because your turn does not end when evolving to a VMAX. You just evolve it, and then you can attack with it, if you have enough energy.
So Meowth VMAX here has 300 HP, which is just absurd. And for only 4 energy. Now that's 2 double colorless. If you had 2 double colorless cards, just slap them on. You can get through this process even faster. You can do 200 damage with this card. And what's the drawback, you may be asking? Nothing. It's actually just a perk. Draw 3 cards. G-Max Gold Rush is insanity.
And I'm not saying it's like the best VMAX ever or anything. It's just a really strong card. 2 turns, 2 attacks. You can knock out any Pokemon. I've been seeing a lot of Pokemon like EX, like new EX and anything, you know, those lowercase EX cards that have over 300 HP. I haven't seen a single card yet that has over 400 HP. 2 turns, and you can destroy any Pokemon on your opponent's team. VMAX does have a little bit of a drawback, though, that other cards like V-Star and Megas don't have. And that's that your opponent takes 3 prize cards when knocking them out. So the game's half over at that point, you know? So that is quite the drawback. I'll give them that. But still, if you manage to actually do 300 damage to this guy, I applaud you.
So you see what I'm saying now, right? I just can't believe the shift, the power creep the Pokemon TCG has gone through in the past, like 10 years? Getting close to 10 years anyway. Those EXs aren't exactly a decade old yet, but they will be in no time at all. Now, nowadays, I would say the most recent rule box card is kind of what I see all these Vs, GXs, EXs being called. Those are lowercase EXs. You can see these are slightly different because back in my day, EXs, they didn't evolve from other Pokemon. Now they do. And now they're a lowercase EX. I gotta stress that because it's kind of confusing otherwise. And there's been EXs before, you know, the Dragonite EX I was just showing you and everything. I know, there's been level X's and all that. But I want to go from a place I have more perspective in. And that's starting with those capital EX cards back in black and white when I first kind of started collecting. I'm going from my own perspective here. Gardevoir EX does have to evolve from a Ralts then a Kirlia. But with 310 HP and being able to dish out 190 damage with no drawback. In fact, you heal from all special conditions. I mean, not to mention the abilities these things have. I haven't even really been talking about abilities. But we've been talking a lot about rule box cards, right? You kind of get my point with these rule box cards. They're crazy. But it's not just the rule box cards this is happening to. I would like to introduce you guys to Farigiraf. Nothing, just Farigiraf. It's not an EX. It's not a GX. It's not a V or anything like that. 140 HP. Now, that's nothing to write home about, per se. But it has an attack called Power Beam. For 3 colorless energy, it does 130 damage. Now, 130 sounds like a lot, but with a lot of these modern EXs, it won't even kill him in 2 hits. It would take about 3. And by then, the whole 140 HP Farigiraf here ain't going to be around to do nothing else more. That was a weird sentence. But that's the thing. If I lose a Farigiraf, it's no big deal. That my opponent only takes 1 prize card. And in 2 turns, 130 damage becomes 260 on your opponent. And that does knock out a lot of GXs and Vs and Mega Evolution Pokemon and all of the old EXs. You can't even use these old EXs anymore because you have a stage 1 Pokemon being able to 2-shot it. And then the creme de la creme here. The card that most inspired me to make this video. Ladies and gentlemen, for your viewing pleasure, Single Strike Dialga. Do you see that second attack? Do you see how much damage it does? With no drawback? This one card, this basic Pokemon, this non-rule box Dialga, can one-shot so many rule box cards. And there is no drawback to using it. You can attack the very next turn, you don't discard any energy, and when this Pokemon faints, when Dialga's been killed, your opponent takes 1 prize card. This, ladies and gentlemen, is true power creep. Power creep isn't something that solely happens in Pokemon. I've seen recently people talking about how it's 10 times worse in Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic the Gathering. And, Pokemon fans are considered lucky for our level of power creep. I wouldn't be surprised if in another 5 years or so, we're seeing rule box cards with 400 something HP. Heck, maybe some even are starting to hit 500. And all these VMAXs that are supposedly unbeatable now are just not worth playing anymore. I think I've taken up enough of your time here. I didn't want this video to turn into one where I'm complaining. I'm not complaining about this because, get with the times, old man, and all that jazz. I just have to start keeping up more now, and that's not a problem. I love Pokemon cards. Like I said, here's that Hisuian Typhlosion V-Star. Look how pretty this card is. I just love Pokemon. I love collecting. And so the TCG is always going to be near and dear to my heart. And I'm excited to see where it goes in the future. I just have to make sure I keep up with power creep. Thank you all so very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, why don't you give it a like and subscribe if you have not already. Follow my Instagram and Facebook, Let's Be Friend 2020. And I mentioned Jokum earlier? Him and I have a podcast. It's called Certified Pokemoments. It's this brand new Pokemon podcast we're doing where we randomly generate one Pokemon and we talk about the entire line. We do this once a week, by the way. Every single week we talk about a new Pokemon line. And there's already like 5, maybe 6 new episodes up. So why don't you guys go watch all those episodes? Because if you like Pokemon, I guarantee you'll enjoy it. And with all that being said, once again, thank you so very much for watching. And until next time.